Welcome to the Independent Voices Award Show presented by Comcast and the Portland Film Festival. We are so excited to have you here tonight to celebrate independent voices. My name is Sholey Thompson. I'm a board member of the festival, and I am honored to be your host tonight. We have several amazing filmmakers that are going to be with us a little bit later, and I cannot wait for you to meet them. This year's festival screened 250 films from around the world. And tonight, we'll be taking a closer look at just a few of them, including films from Black Voices, The Female Gaze, Voices of Ability, and even one of our audience award winners. Here are some of the filmmakers from this year's festival.
Hello, Portland Film Festival. My name is Kevin McTurk.
Dwayne Logan.
Katie Cronin.
Sophie Somerville.
My name is Lily Nelson.
My name is Sonia Oberly.
I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kimberly.
Sean David Christensen.
Hi, my name is Jackie Party Scripps.
Thomas Pace.
Tessa Hope Slovis.
I'm Carl Hansen.
My name is Tracy McGregor.
I'm Christiana Wu.
My name is Baldev Sandhu.
Kate Ryan Brewer.
Melissa Gregory Rue.
Hi, my name is Charlie Young.
Varda Barkar.
Hunter Arthur.
My name is Kiki Sakalakis.
Howdy. My name is Mackenzie Woodward.
I'm Jennifer Masumba, and I'm from Florida. And my new film is in the Voices of Ability block. It's called The Fish Don't Care When It Rains.
Hi, my name is Allison Becker, and I am the director of the music video Ass Level.
Miles Levine. I'm the writer-director of Under the Lights.
Oh, hello. I'm Chance Mulick. My film is called Below.
Hello, my name is Amy Bilhars. I am a Seattle-based video artist, filmmaker, and director of the music video Don't Ever Give Up for artist Jay Gregory.
My name is Paul Joseph. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I am the director and editor of Swim with Mike.
My name is Susan Toney, and my film is Have a Nice Day.
My name is Devon Xavier King. I'm the director of The Last Black Man.
Hello, Portland Film Festival. My name is Mike James. I am the writer-director of The Last House.
Hi, my name is Megan Ross, and I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm the writer, director, and producer of An Uncomfortable Woman.
I am the writer, director, and OCP of the short film Black Thoughts.
I am the writer-director of a movie called Peeps.
And I'm the director of The Haunted Swordsman.
And I am the director on the film Thumb War.
My short film, Naxlahan Kipa, One Day Long Ago.
And I am the director and producer of Not a Forced Marriage Story.
I'm the writer, director, and producer for the short film ALVIN.
I'm the director of A.
Tracy Lehman. I'm the writer and director of Ghosted.
I'm the director and editor for The American Dream.
We've made a short documentary film for the Easterfield Disability Film Challenge called Independence.
I am the writer and director of the short film The Lobbyists.
And I'm the writer, director, and producer of Esperanza's Turn.
And I am the writer and director of a short film titled Silent Notes.
And I am the artist and producer for the music video Hold the Moon.
I am the writer, director, and producer of Mr. Weekend.
And I'm the director of Fandango at the Wall.
My film, documentary short called The Forgotten Ones.
My short film Costumes is based on my real-life fear of wearing costumes.
As you are well aware, 2020 has been a little bit crazy. It has proven to challenge us all in so many different ways. And trying to host a film festival in the middle of a pandemic was definitely one of those challenges. However, the wonderful festival team came up with multiple ways to focus on independent voices. Thanks to our amazing partnership with Comcast and Kerner Camera, we brought festival content to the entire network of subscribers. Our festival would not be possible without Comcast and their technology. Their continued commitment to community and independent voices is inspiring. Let's take a look at Chase's story.
Chase is amazing. He's never felt sorry for himself, and we never wanted him to.
Some people say, you can't play this. Instead, I just show them how I do it. I like being independent. Accessibility. It makes me feel good.
The voice command specifically just allows him to regain even more confidence.
Because of technology, he'll be able to do anything.
just like Chase, anyone with Comcast service can simply say Portland Film Festival into their Comcast X1 or their Flex Voice remote for free selections of films. The other way, viewers can go to portlandfilm.org to access all the festival's current films until November 20th, 2020. The next way, finally, we had an in-person opportunity. We did screening pods. Let's take a look at those.
Welcome to Portland Film Festival's first ever screening pods. Hosted by the Hilo Hotel in downtown Portland, guests were welcomed to the red carpet after being scanned by Cleaner Path's thermal temperature readers. Volunteers equipped with PPE coordinate to ensure family bubbles were safely directed to their private screening pods. Each pod, along with personal selection of film on 75-inch TVs, came with complimentary Poplandia popcorn and hand sanitizer by Shine Spirits. With help of Hilo Hotel and Cleaner Path, each room had a cleaning cycle after each film had finished.
Thank you. I am so excited to invite on the screen with me Holly Popkin, our Director of Volunteers. Hi, Holly.
Hello.
You must just be exhausted. That looked like a lot of work.
It was a lot of fun. It was busy and it was a lot of fun. And we had lots of people dressing up. We had heels, suits. It was wonderful. It's really great to see so many people out at a new theater experience.
Yeah, people must have been excited just to get out of their like yoga pants.
Right.
So it looked like a ton of fun. What was your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I really loved that we had so many different ways that you could festival this year. We had all the 3 different ways, and then our volunteers have just been amazing with like coming together on this new. We've come up with this new idea of screening pods, and everyone was on board. And we've just had so much support from the community to help get filmmakers' work seen in a different way. And just seeing like the filmmakers when they come in to these new pods and we show them up to the rooms and it's all different, and just the excitement and how like grateful everyone is. And it was really fun. It was an amazing experience. And I'm so glad that we had the support from all our volunteers. Everyone has been absolutely amazing with this brand new process.
Yeah. Man, you know, it just shows that the festival team, like yourself, isn't going to let anything stop them, not even a pandemic. Well, thank you so much, Holly. We appreciate your help, and we want to thank all of the volunteers and the sponsors for their hard work and their heartfelt dedication. Now, let's get to meet the Director of Programming at the Portland Film Festival, Joe Stevens, who will be interviewing our first award-winning filmmaker from the category of Black Voices.
Thank you, Jolie. I'm honored to introduce Dwayne Logan, the writer, director, and lead actor in Black Thought.
Joe, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. Yourself?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you. Can you give us a quick idea what your film's about?
Yeah, the Black Thoughts, the short film that I made, it's really intended to be a conversational piece. Piece with the intent of kind of starting some much needed dialogue out there in the world. I kind of made it with just after feeling a bit overwhelmed with the weight of living and what seemed to be almost an alternate reality from like the people around me, with like day-to-day experiences, feeling like they're taking place in an alternate universe, because things that I was seeing and feeling and perceiving, like things that were breaking my heart, almost seemed invisible to the world around me. I kind of made it as an expression of that state of being, that feeling of being isolated and alienated, and that forced me to ask some questions about what truth was and whether or not truth could play a role in fixing some of the things that I saw around me.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dwayne, for introducing your film. I believe we have a trailer to play. So let's roll that.
Okay.
Black thoughts flood my mind.
You shouldn't care what people think.
Shouldn't care what people think. Not caring. What a luxury.
just can't read your handwriting. Black people don't take good care of their property.
Everything all right, miss? Just want to make sure you're not in any danger. I wish that the weight of what needs lifting wasn't so heavy. I wish that truth was mandatory. I wish that there was a way for us all to exchange eyes for a moment. Drowning in a sea of black thoughts.
Yeah, such an incredibly powerful film and like so timely. How did you come about making this film? How did you get the idea? So you talked about wanting to express truth, but I mean, how did you come about making it?
Yeah, it's funny. I think the more and more I think about like how to answer that question, the more I think about a couple of realities that kind of need to be shared, at least from my perspective, that others might not see as reality. And there's some ubiquitous ideas in America that concern racism and inequality. Some of those ideas, they sound like if you ask someone if racism exists, and a lot of people would say, sure, it does, but it's a really uncommon evil that only rears its head every now and then, or it's only seen within the bad apples of society. You hear ideas like racism is often just people that are looking, or people that cry racism are just people looking for pity, or people that are making tired excuses for wrongs that they brought upon themselves, and that racism ended with Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. And you hear things like, well, King, he was someone that really knew how to go about trying to change things in a real way because he dealt with real racism, and real racism is no longer a thing. You hear things like that about, even guys like Dr. King spinning in his grave because he would be so disappointed in this current generation. You hear people say things like, if you're having trouble with police, it's most likely your fault, and that there's no such thing as systemic abuse. And so I think day in and day out, hearing some of those ideas, especially hearing them as come across as what many people find to be their truth, while simultaneously looking around and becoming more and more and more and more heartbroken. I think I just got to a point where I was going to just implode or split in half, and felt like I just had to say something. And thankfully, I teamed up with a couple of really great guys that gave me the opportunity to bring this to life. There are a few other scripts that I wrote that we were hoping to shoot. COVID got the best of those, with budget considerations having to be reevaluated and things like that. But I'm happy that happened, because it forced me to kind of think outside of the box and put on the hat that I've often worn as an AD, and to come up with a way to speak about some of these things in a way that would not only be financially reasonable, but logistically reasonable, that we could shoot during COVID. And it actually, at the end of the day, I'm really happy with the way that the concept really leans into what was needed, because I think it's certainly a lo-fi setup with just me on a stage in this very dark abyss. But it makes sense when you think about what's being conveyed, just that loneliness and that isolation and thought of wondering, am I crazy? Like to think this way? Do these things really exist? And so there's the long answer to the short question.
Yeah, there talks about truth a couple times here, and that it can be pretty hard to explore, especially today, where truth is as relative as it could ever be, with everybody picking, whatever reality they want to live in. How hard was it to get to the core of this story? Because I mean, the Black experience isn't monolithic. I think I've said that before here, but there are a lot of commonalities, and you touched on a lot of things that that are definitely shared in the community. How difficult was that to get to that emotional point?
Man, what a great question. We say that truth is relative, and so many people kind of have their own version of it. I think that's what was that right there is what was so incredibly hard to work around, because there are some truths of perception because we all live in our own bubbles. Then there's history, and history, it either happened or it didn't. And so trying to really have a conversation in a way to where it didn't come across as preachy or teachy, but just to say, hey, like, can we do two things? One, can we look at my personal history? And my personal history has to be considered as a form of truth because it either happened to me or it didn't. And then simultaneously, can we also look at American history that is a bit tougher to argue because it either happened or it didn't. And I hope that the combination of the two, that maybe when people see some of my personal history in the film, it gives them enough of a pause, and it hopefully allows people to kind of put the guard down a little bit and just say, hey, this is a human. We're hearing from a human. It's the heart of a human, the experiences of a human. And hopefully that disarms them enough to be able to see some of the American history and to really digest it and see how that history applies to today. And I think that's been the biggest challenge, which is like seeing what's happening today in context of how it came to be. And I think if we can do that, there are these two versions of problems that we're addressing that can maybe be helped. There's the kind of racism that's just in people's hearts. And if we could get to that heart issue, we can make some progress. But then there's the type of racism that's more institutional, that it's built in and burned in. It's a system, it's a machine. It's woven into the fabric of America, and we can't really see that without the history. And so I really tried to hopefully kind of bring about both of those truths in a way to where they'd be digestible and tough to offend.
Yeah. Great points. I mean, I'm going to get off the tough questions for a second. Do you have any plans to expand this film in any way, or where do you want to take it?
And trying to get so much history about, like you said, the Black experience in America is not monolithic, but in so many ways we do share so much common history. Trying to get all of that history together into a 30-minute piece was really, really tough to do, because I didn't want to make it too long or too short. I think in a perfect world, if I had an opportunity to bump it to a feature, to rest on some of those conversational points a little bit longer, to give it a little bit more context, that would be great. And the guys, Joel and Jesse over at Evolve Studios, we're in talks about doing that. They've had some chats with some people out there in the streaming worlds and streaming platforms about whether or not that makes sense to just turn it into a feature, or even to break out some of these topics into miniature episodes where we just rest on one topic at a time. That's another idea for it. And then some really, really great humans have reached out about some other killer ideas, one of which is turning it into a live stage play. It would be integrated into a really cool event that may be happening on Juneteenth coming up, which is something I never even thought about, because the film itself, it feels a bit like, I'm peeling off a scab in front of everyone to see. And so I was like, I don't know how I would do that again in front of people, but I love the idea with some additional thought, because the whole goal of the film is to hopefully allow people to step inside of my heart and inside of my mind. And I think that would be really cool to do in a physical space, if we could all just kind of get into this space in a big dark room together and kind of walk through it. So those are some of the things that are being batted around. We'll see if we can climb some of the hurdles that present themselves with making even the shortest film possible and get them done.
Yeah, I think we'd all be excited to watch either the episodic or the feature or even the stage play if it comes to that. That'd be very interesting to go see. Anything else you want us to know about your film?
Man, I think more than anything, I just want to extend an invitation for anyone that watches it to go into it with an open heart and an open mind. And so many of these the topics, sadly, are topics that divide a lot of people, and I think we've seen that and really highlighted during recent times, and just the level of division in America. And it's crazy when you think about it. It's like, well, it seems so straightforward that we should all be able to get on the same page over the subject, but man, we're talking about things that have been handed down for generations, from great grandpa to all the way down to until now. And so I know that there's just a large portion of society that I hope sees it, but I know that some of those people that I hope view it would more than likely go into it with some preconceived notions and some preconceived ideas that they would have to, at the very least, be able to just pause for a second and hear out the entire film. And there's certainly a lot of moments throughout the film where I think if the film is not watched in its entirety, the message could be taken the wrong way. So that's the other ask. One is to please watch it with an open heart, and two, please watch it in its entirety and hear out the whole of the heart that's being offered there.
Yeah, no, we talked to the director before about your hopefulness with this film, how it does seem a little heavy, and it is a little heavy, but it does end on hope, and that's something I think is very beautiful. And yeah, well, thank you so much for this. We have one last question for you. Our common thread question we'll be hearing throughout the evening. What does supporting independent voices mean to you?
Oh man, in the film business, I think we take for granted, at least people that are not in the business, what that really means. It is a business, and people make films. Our films get made usually because someone sees a way to make money on that film. And so independent film, I think, is really important, and it exists because there's a population of people and artists that feel like they're everywhere yet nowhere at the same time, that they're present but not seen. And so in order to be seen or to be heard, because a lot of voices are overlooked, a lot of human experiences aren't popular, they don't seem like lucrative ideas or experiences to put into film, a lot of filmmakers and artists have to go the independent route, and they've got to dig into their own pockets and find really creative ways to get those stories onto a screen. And that's just, man, that's a mountain to climb. And if you can do that, then the question is, how do you get people to see it? And so it really makes me grateful for festivals like this one that don't just say, hey, we're going to feature independent films, but hope for independent films and highlight independent films and the filmmakers and the storytellers behind them, and at the very least affirm some of those filmmakers and encourage some of those filmmakers, and take shaky voices and kind of steal them a little bit and say, hey, like, keep going. And at the very best, they catapult some of those films out into the world in ways that they would never have been able to have been catapulted otherwise. And so, independent film in short, it really does, in many ways, serve as a vehicle for a lot of silenced voices to make their way into society in ways that they really may not have ever been able to otherwise.
Well, thank you so much, Dwayne. I mean, we were so honored to have your film with us. Thank you for submitting it. You can check out Black Thoughts by simply saying Portland Film Festival into your Xfinity X1 Flare remote or your Flex Voice remote, or head on to portlandfilm.org. Well, thank you again, Dwayne, and let's go back to our host, Jolie.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dwayne and Joe. You know, this movie is not a long one, but it is so hugely impactful. It's a must-see for sure. Our next interviewer is the founder of Rapid, a nonprofit helping people with disabilities. We are pleased to welcome Emily Puri, who will be interviewing our next award-winning filmmaker in the Voices of Ability chat.
Thank you, Shelley. I am honored and excited to introduce Doug Rowland, writer, director, and producer of Feeling Through.
Hey, Emily, it's so great to talk with you today.
Absolutely. How's your experience going so far with Portland Film Festival?
Portland's been really amazing, and obviously, capped off by something like this. This is a really special thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, let's first take a look at that trailer of Feeling Through so all of our viewers here can get an idea of what we're talking about today.
Breaking barriers in the film industry, he's believed to be the first blind and deaf man cast in a leading role.
It doesn't matter if I'm deaf and legally blind. I still felt like I could do it.
The Helen Keller National Center says its goal this year is to provide accessibility for all.
You're now part of the community.
I'm going to make it required viewing for my students. It's so important. Thank you so much.
Doug, I got to tell you, as a legally blind woman, just seeing the trailer in itself gives me the chills. And so I so greatly appreciate you putting this together and having the opportunity to speak with you today. So let's just get straight to the questions here. First of all, this wasn't just a creative idea. It wasn't just something you stumbled upon. What inspired you to put something like this together?
Yeah, so I'm gonna tell this quickly, but I'm gonna take you back 9 years. I live in LA now, but I'm from New York City, and when I was still living there, I was coming home late one night. I was in the East Village, and I saw a man standing on a street corner by himself. And he was holding a sign that said, "I'm deaf and blind and need help crossing the street." My first thought was, wow, I've never met anyone who's deaf blind before. I approached him and I tapped him, and he took out a notepad and wrote a bus stop that he needed. So I took him to that bus stop, and when we got there, late night, if you've just missed a bus, another one isn't coming for an hour or so, which was the case here. So I wanted to let him know that I was going to sit and wait with him, and I didn't know how to communicate with him. So I just kind of like instinctively took his palm and started tracing one letter at a time on it. And he understood what I was writing to him, that I would sit and wait with him. And we ended up having a whole conversation that way of him writing to me in his notepad, me writing back one letter at a time on his palm. And I got to know him as this really charismatic, interesting, funny, just warm-hearted guy who I felt like I'd really made a connection with. His name was Artemio. And to the point where when his bus came, we gave each other a big hug goodbye, and I was like tearing up, going like, I'm going to miss my new friend. And that was really the, I think just in short, not only was it just such a impactful experience. But I think in one sitting, I went from first seeing this man as his disability in the sense that the first thing I thought was, oh, wow, I've never met a deafblind man before, to leaving the interaction going like, I made this new friend Artemio who I'm going to really miss. And there was a little bit of a light bulb moment that went off there. And that was the jump off point for it.
Wow, that's incredible. I just want to ask just for a moment, like, what was that feeling? So I'll build on this in the next question, but were you scared? Were you nervous? Was it uncomfortable to approach him that first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what's funny? I always bring this back to like New Yorkers. I just feel like New Yorkers are so like about just kind of like, I think contrary to what a lot of people might say, I find New Yorkers to be some of the like nicest, most outgoing people when it comes to helping other people. So for me, I think it was just a lot of like the culture of a New Yorker just going like, hey, someone seems like they need help and I'm just going to jump in and do my best to help. So for me, there wasn't any hesitation around that. I was just happy that I was walking down the street that night and able to help in any way I could.
Gosh, I love it. I love it. So this isn't, your first time submitting to the Portland Film Festival, or this festival, I should say, but this has multiple layers to this project. Tell us more about what this has included for you and how you've done the work and how you've done the research in the deafblind community.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. I told you that story, that was the origin story of it that took place 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I wrote the film not too long after that, but it would be another about 4 or 5 years until I felt like I was really ready to do it justice. And at that point, I reached out to the Helen Keller National Center, who's they're an amazing organization who I still partner with today. But I approached them and I said, hey, look, I have this film that I want to make, and it includes a deafblind character, and I want to cast a deafblind actor in it. And I said to them verbatim, I said, is that crazy? Because at the time, I didn't know. I knew nothing about the deafblind community other than this one man who I'd met. And so we worked together to cast Robert Tarango, who's our deafblind actor in the film. And we found out during the process, the first deafblind actor ever to star in a film. So we worked with them to cast him. And then together, during the process and talking with a lot of people in the community, I just realized that documenting it in this journey in some fashion would prove to be useful at some point down the line. I wasn't really quite thinking what yet. But we ended up making a documentary following the process of not just casting and working with our deafblind actor, Robert Tarango, but also our year-long search for Artemio, the man that I'd met years prior who inspired all of this. And cool. We actually ended up taking that around as a 3-part screening event that is called the Feeling Through Experience, because the film is titled Feeling Through, but the Feeling Through Experience is a 3-part event that includes Feeling Through, also the supporting documentary called Connecting the Dots, and also a 3rd part, which is a panel discussion and Q&A with the deafblind community. And we've done a number of those, and it's an opportunity to highlight a lot of different voices in the community and really get to have this collective experience. So much of what I experienced when I met Artemio 9 years ago was, wow, I made a new friend with someone I'd never encountered before in my life. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to create an environment and events where we could connect the deafblind community with the general public, and so that they could have a shared experience together and bond and learn from each other. And that's the multifaceted 3-part event called the Feeling Through Experience.
I love it. And how many of those did you get a chance to do before? I think it was COVID that stopped you, correct?
Well, what was great is we did 14 fully accessible events before COVID, very fortunately. And the accessibility is a huge part of this. And, Emily, I know in getting to know a little bit about what you do, obviously this is something that certainly is important to you, I'm sure. But, I wanted to make sure that the community that is very much at the heart of this could experience it themselves. I didn't want to just put something out there that the deafblind community, the blind and low vision communities couldn't participate in. So we made these Feeling Through Experience, we made as a fully accessible event where we had as many as 50 interpreters and support staff at a single screening to provide a one-on-one personalized, accessible experience for anyone who's partaking. So, for people in the deafblind community, there's quite a spectrum of manifestations of deaf blindness. So for people who are, pretty much entirely deaf and blind, they had a tactile experience. So that the entire, both films and the Q&A would be tactilely signed into their hands. We had an audio described version for people who are blind or low vision. And we also had large open captions on the screen, and various other interpreters that provided the accessibility to make it accessible for anyone to participate in.
That is amazing. So I have to say, I don't know if you know her, but I got to throw a shout out to Marikar, who works at the Helen Keller Center. And we got our guide dogs at Guiding Eyes together. And so she is the first deafblind person I interacted with was almost 2 years ago to the date almost. So I have to say shout out. But moving on. So as somebody who is passionate about, obviously, as a person with disability, as well as makes a living off educating corporations and organizations and educating people about how to interact with people with disabilities in general, but also how to hire people with disabilities, how to make the environment more inclusive for people with disabilities. This is something I work on every day. And I would love to know some of those things that our viewers today could take away that you learned in the last 9 years, but also that they can take action on today if they are wanting to be more inclusive or they're inspired to, change their ways a little bit. What did you learn, and how can they change their ways?
That's a really great question. The short of it, I'll answer it quickly in two different ways. One is the really kind of practical to the point ways, but one is kind of a larger macro view. And I'm going to go to the macro view first. And the way I'd answer that is one of the first things I said when I approached the Helen Keller National Center is I said, this is a film that includes a deafblind character that I want to be played by a deafblind actor, but it's not a film about deaf blindness. It's a film about human connection and really ultimately the power of human connection despite our differences. And something that I learned in my first interaction with Artemio and interacting with now many dozens, maybe 100 or more people in the deafblind community and many more in the blind, low vision communities is the very simple thing that I think can be missed for someone who's maybe doesn't connect with those, has not had an opportunity to connect with those communities. They're people just like anyone else. And I know that was like intellectual for me before I really got a chance to like form close relationships and strong friendships and have colleagues who are deafblind. And I think that's a thing that's like often just intellectualized. And I think to really ingest that and have that be more of a visceral understanding, because I think if you approach people from that place first, it'll take care of a lot of what you don't know, because immediately you'll rid yourself of a lot of false assumptions. Immediately you'll do away with things that might be perceived as not thoughtful or maybe disrespectful, because if you're coming from that place, you'll learn anything that you don't know, and you'll just by coming with an open mind and that kind of like really big, like really foundational understanding. But some really practical things, just from a media standpoint, it's really easy to add captions to any content that you put up. So just obviously being in the media space a lot, obviously YouTube and certain places do it automatically. There's a lot of like free captioning software. I think that's something that goes a really long way around accessibility. I think that, I think just taking it from a film standpoint, because there's so many ways in which we could talk about this. I think I encourage filmmakers and any visual storytellers to learn more about audio description, which again is, Feeling Through is a great example of something that really needs audio description, because there's so little dialogue in the film that if you're blind or low vision, you're not going to know what's going on if you don't have another narrative track that's explaining what's happening on the screen. So an audio description right now would be, like a white male in his mid 30s with a little bit of scruff and a button-up shirt is talking into camera with a plain white background and maybe a little bit of his refrigerator peeking out on the side of the screen. But it's something that would fill in the visual cues that someone who's blind or low vision wouldn't see. And I think that's something that really there's so many people out there that want to consume content that would be very eager to listen to your audio described version of your film or visual content. So those are a couple things that, again, just being that this is a film festival and that I'm a filmmaker, that I'd answer that question. But there's so many other ways in which we, could get into at some other point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, before we get to our last question, I've got to ask, is there anything coming next? I mean, you've been doing this 9 years, research and engaging with the community. You have this film, you have the documentary. Is there anything coming next? I got to know.
Yeah. So the COVID has not stopped us in the sense of, obviously, Portland, it didn't stop the Portland Film Festival either. But in addition to, getting a chance to show it at amazing festivals like Portland, we've continued to do a virtual feeling through experience that's still fully accessible. So we'll do live streams of the feeling through experience that will have an ASL interpreter box interpreting our live conversation. It'll have live captions on the screen for both films and our discussion. And it'll also have a stream text link that is compatible with Braille displays for anyone who wants to participate tactily. So we're still doing that virtually. You can go to feelingthrough.com if you want to learn more about that. But we're gonna make a feature film version of Feeling Through. Definitely, not just because there's so much more of a story that we want to explore there, but also we want to continue to redefine what people think is possible. And I want to have the first F1 actor in a feature film as well. And I want that to be a huge part of putting the film out there, because I want other people to consider actors who are deafblind, actors who are blind or low vision, actors who are deaf or hard of hearing. Because don't exactly quote me on these numbers. I know they're pretty close. They might be a little bit off, but something like only 5% of characters in film and TV are characters with disabilities. And I believe something like as small as 5% of those characters are played by actors with disabilities. Obviously, that's something that needs to change. There's so many actors out there with disabilities who are incredibly talented and really eager to have their voices heard. So certainly make a feature film version of this. And we're continuing to take it around to other opportunities, where we'll be at the India Inclusion Summit later this month, using it to speak on inclusion in India and other events like that as well. So that's kind of what the future holds for us.
I love it. I love it. I'm super excited. I'm going to definitely stay tuned on the website there. So our last question is, what does supporting independent films mean to you?
It's a great question. To me, I find that as someone who really is not good at telling any other story other than something that really speaks to me in a really visceral way, I find that a lot of independent filmmakers are really good at identifying the stories that need to be told, even if they don't fit into the boxes that maybe the industry at large might be creating, and the stories that they might be promoting. And I think it's really important to hear, stories that might not be mainstream stories, but are the stories that I think I just look at what's happening in the world right now, and I think that stories that were maybe voices that were maybe more independent or marginalized, you might say, in that context, are the very voices that are shaping where we realize we need to evolve, the world that we need to evolve into. So usually those voices that are a little bit more independent or on the fringes are the very voices that are illuminating us to that which we need to be addressing in order to move forward, whether it be in the film world as filmmakers and storytellers and viewers of that media, or in the world at large of the kind of topics that are going to shape us in the way that we need to become a better society or a better world. So, filmmaking and the stories that we tell and the stories that we consume really help create our understanding of the world around us. And it's really important to have that representation in our stories so that we can have a better and more proper view of the world around us.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And it just shows the need for diversity and inclusion. And that's why we're here tonight, is to hear those independent voices. So Thank you so much, Doug. This was awesome. For all the viewers out there, if you want to go ahead and click on Feeling Through, and you can just say Portland Film in your Comcast or Xfinity X1 remote or the Flex Voice remote. You can say Portland Film, and you can find Feeling Through there or on portlandfilm.org. So thank you so much, Doug. This was awesome, and we'll definitely have to connect and talk more in the future.
Yes, I'd love to. And if I could just say one last thing, a huge thank you to Portland Film Festival, and also to our ongoing partners in this, Helen Keller Services. And for anyone who maybe heard this conversation and was like, wants to know more about the deafblind community, I really encourage you to go to helenkeller.org and find out more there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily and Doug, for taking us on that deeper dive into the film Feeling Through. I will say this film is a beautiful reminder that giving to others is often the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves. It's a beauty. Next up, we're turning to The Female Gaze, and these are films that are all directed by women. So I am pleased to welcome our interviewer, Diane Morgan-Sylvain, and the writer, director, and producer of the short film Pizza Party, Tessa Hope Slovis.
Thank you, Shelley. Please join me in welcoming Tessa Hope Slovis, writer, director, and producer of Pizza Party.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Now, I have some questions for you, but before we get started, let's go ahead and watch the clip.
I was asked today to come up here and emotionally prepare you all for tomorrow. But I want to be honest with you. I'm about to bring a little boy into the world. And I don't even know how I could bring myself to look at a child that would break someone the way that he broke. I was 16, a high school varsity gymnast. And he was the best of the best.
Gosh, every time I see that trailer, it gets me. It's made such a powerful, compelling film. Why was it important for you to tell this story?
Well, it kind of came at a really beautiful moment in my life. I was in my final year of MFA acting training at USC, and I was in a directing class, a filmmaking class for actors. And it was right kind of towards the tail end of the Larry Nassar trials. And I had been listening to this podcast on Michigan radio through NPR called Believed. And it was all about the systems of belief and how Larry Nassar was able to convince and manipulate young women and their families into kind of not trusting, not believing the testimonies and the allegations of these young girls, writing them off as children, saying, "Oh no, this is just a medical procedure," really, really insidious ways. And I am also a sexual assault survivor myself, directly correlated in college and educational institutions. So these were all really, it kind of came at this beautiful moment where I was taking this class, I was listening to this podcast, and we were tasked to write a short, a one location under 10-minute short. And my teacher, Jean Gallerano, who also helped produce the film as a co-producer and stars in the film as Max, came up to me at the end of class after reading my script. And he was like, we need to make this. we can't do this in class. You're going to make this movie. I think you're a filmmaker. And it was the first screenplay I'd ever written, and here it is now. So really, it asks the question. Ultimately, Pizza Party asks the question of what would a pizza party for sexual assault survivors look like?
How did you prepare your cast and crew for tackling such a sensitive subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest elements of dealing with conversations around sexual assault and sexual violence is openness. I was really clear and really honest with my crew from the very beginning, even as we were going into auditions, as we were going into interviews, crewing up at pre-production, that I'm a survivor. And that I care about this story, and that I honor and respect and admire survivors and the loved ones of survivors. And every single person on the team had some sort of personal stake in it. And that's why they wanted to do the project, because they read the script and they connected with it in that way. Either they had been affected or they knew someone. And in terms of preparing the actors, on the first day, the first thing I said to anybody, we all came in, we had a big meeting, actors, crew, everyone was there. I said, listen, if you feel unsafe, if you feel uncomfortable, if you just need a break, tell me. Say, I need to stop privately, however you need to do it, and we will take as long as you need. Their experience, their safety in my hands in that moment was always more important to me than the film. And I think that is why the film ended up being what it was, because everybody felt safe. So that was a big part of this process as I was working with the actors. And there were certainly many moments where there were moments where people got triggered. There were moments where we had to stop. But because we were all holding each other so tightly as a community in that, one room attic of a church, it really, people felt really safe because of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, one of the things that was shown in the clip there is Carrie, number one, her being pregnant. Why did you include that?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things for me when I decided really to make the film was one of the things that I get really frustrated about when it comes to representations of sexual assault survivors in the media is that it's incredibly anemic and it's incredibly one-dimensional. It always tends to be, thin, mostly white, 16, 17, 18-year-old girl. It's very brooding, very emotional. And I often feel that the Me Too movement is getting clouded by these representations. And so for me, as a survivor myself, survivorship is completely subjective, and recovery and, understanding your own experiences is not linear. We joke about it. We're strange. We're unusual. We pretend it never happened. We have flashbacks. We're three-dimensional people. And in that, there's also this element of the body. So much about survivorship is reclaiming our own bodies. So you'll notice in the film, there's a lot of conversations, a lot of imagery of food, of the body, of thinness, of body diversity, and pregnancy. Because one of the things I think about a lot as a survivor is this common question of, what is it like to have a son? One, what is it like to reclaim your body through pregnancy? But also, what would it be like if I had a son? And how do we raise young men? So pregnancy kind of held this dual representation where it really was about this idea of raising sons and what that kind of internal struggle for a survivor is, but then also on the other hand, reclaiming our bodies and what that looks like when ultimately pregnancy is something that is so personal and so within you, but it's also very out of your control in a lot of ways. And it really mimics that, a lot of those feelings of out of bodiness, and can often, for a lot of survivors, trigger moments, flashbacks within the context of their sexual assaults.
I noticed a resemblance between the little girl number 42 and number 1. Was that intentional?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And it's actually something that a lot of people don't notice in the film. So in the film, not to spoil it if you haven't watched it yet, there's kind of this ghost-like child. She really represents the child of these women, this kind of like universal child before, their assault. And what happens is that you see this little girl who's about 9 years old, and then you have number 42 who's, supposed to be 16, 17. And then we have number 1 who's in her mid 30s. And what you start to realize is that they're reflections of each other. And what I really wanted to represent there is in so much classic literature, we have these 3 different versions of the woman. And also this idea that any path could be the path of a survivor. You could be number 42. You could be number 1. And also when number 42, this young teenager looks at number 1, she sees a reflection of herself and there's hope there. So yeah, absolutely. They're all kind of supposed to be representations of each other, weaving in and out of each other's lives.
So what's next for you and for Pizza Party?
Well, for Pizza Party, we are kind of in the middle of our festival run. So we are heading to several festivals through the month of November and December. We probably won't be closing out our run until around spring of 2021. Which is really exciting because you have so many more chances to catch it at different festivals. And then for me, I am, this is I'm a first-time filmmaker. So I am now kind of pivoting, trying to make something new. I'm currently working on a script with an incredible co-writer about white female complicity in this era of racial justice that we're fighting for. So that's the piece that's kind of on the forefront of my mind right now, but really making this big transition into, from being on camera to being off.
That's great. That sounds like a very interesting film. I'll keep an eye out for it.
Yes.
Now you get the big question of the night. What do independent voices mean to you?
Well, I think in terms of voices, I think two-pronged. So in terms of voices, especially in these conversations about sexual assault, sexual violence, and domestic abuse, it is very, very hard for someone to speak out. And no man is an island. And I think when one voice is heard, it often opens up the gates for other people to be able to speak. That's exactly what happened in the Larry Nassar trials. One article was written, and all of a sudden, the first day of the trial, there were 56 women that were supposed to testify. The number is now, as of 2019, in the 200s. And that is just because women are galvanized to speak when they feel safe, when they hear each other. So I think an independent voice in that way can do a lot. And then in terms of filmmaking, to echo so much of what the other filmmakers that came before me in this conversation had said, is that independent filmmakers make films because they love to tell stories. It's not for a profit. It's not for any big production company. It's not for anything other than the love of storytelling. And that, as an artist in so many different facets, as a multi-hyphenated artist, to make art because you love it, to make art because you have to, that is a crucial pillar of this community. And I cannot speak highly enough about all of the films that we've shared tonight, but all of the films that I've been able to see at Portland and within the context of my festival circuit.
That's so great. Thank you so much for coming out and talking with us. If you have not seen Pizza Party or any of the other films or want to catch the rest of the festival, just bring out your handy remote, your X1 or Flex voice remote, and say Portland Film Festival, or go to portlandfilm.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Diana and Tessa. You know, as an agent, I could see watching this film just how comfortable and supported the actors felt because their acting is very strong. And as a viewer, I felt equally as supported and as empowered. I can't wait for the rest of the world to see this really great film. Our final filmmaker won the Portland Film Festival Audience Award. So we are happy to welcome our interviewer, Mary-Eve Monette, and the writer, director, and star of Apocalypse A Go-Go, Savannah Gislison.
Thank you, Sholi, and I am so excited to be introducing you to Savannah Gislison, the producer, director, actress, and so many other roles for the Audience Award-winning Apocalypse A Go-Go. Welcome, Savannah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here with us tonight. Before we get started, can you tell us how your experience has been with the Portland Film Festival so far?
I mean, it's been really amazing. It's amazing that a festival was actually able to be put on in the midst of the world changing like this. And for it to be so smooth, to run so smoothly, and for there to be so many opportunities to see these movies, I really couldn't think that it could have gone better.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Well, I have a few questions to ask you, but before we do that, we have a trailer for your film. So let's go take a look.
10 is categories again.
Let's do something spicy, huh? Sex positions.
Okay. Reverse cowgirl.
Surprised you know that.
Doggy style.
That's your favorite? Missionary. No surprise. That's that 1.5 years speaking.
Really?
You too, Venezuela. You're her partner.
Yeah.
Take a drink.
Thanks.
You said it might not be coming.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, okay. The Nile at its fucking finest.
What a clip. I love this clip because it really introduces us to both the dark comedy and also the drama that is at the heart of this movie. So before we get started about talking about the movie itself and the characters, can you tell us what people, what personal experiences, what events maybe inspired you to make the film and to make it such a mix of comedy and drama?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a New Orleanian and I am a Hurricane Katrina survivor. And so my entire experience through the 10 days after the hurricane hit and once the water started rising was feeling like help was always going to come. It was going to come tomorrow. It didn't come tomorrow. It was going to come the next day, the next day, the next day. And how watching as my city was simultaneously drowning on fire at the same exact time, that the only thing that I really had to cling on to was my family and the connection and being in a hot room. It was very quiet. It was very personal and intimate. And so the apocalypse to me just never seemed like a huge 2012-esque event that everybody sort of thinks of it as, like the big Hollywood version of an apocalypse. It's just so quiet. And it's about the people who are around you sitting in just a hot room, drinking, reading stories, just sitting there in silence. So that was a huge inspiration, and that and pretty much everything else I've made as well. But the main idea of the story actually came about in my final semester at film school, where I was about to graduate. And I felt like I had created an identity and I was a certain kind of person there. And I was really terrified that I was going to have to say goodbye to that piece of myself. Like I was undergoing a little death as soon as I was to go out into the real world of film, because it's like, it felt almost like, does Hollywood really need or want another independent filmmaker? I felt a little I didn't feel particularly optimistic about my chances and about my life independently outside of school. It was a new chapter, and everybody around me, everyone in the film even, felt the same way. Nobody particularly felt optimistic about the future. It seemed like we were walking out into this world where everything was just, crumbling apart, and it was going to be really hard for us to all find opportunities. And so that's pretty much where the ball started rolling, as far as like sort of putting it together and wanting to sort of not only say goodbye to that piece of myself or the pieces of everybody else in the film or those characters in the film. It was about also taking pieces of what we would do in college. So much of college is sitting around playing drinking games and having stupid conversations. And that's something that I knew that I was going to miss. And that was something that I wanted to experience and put on camera. As the real world felt like it was falling apart, as figuratively it felt like it was falling apart. I wanted to tell a story like that.
Wonderful. I love your answer and how focused it is on human connection, on sharing of stories, and on that intimate moment of crisis. It's not always as big, as you said, as in 2012 or on the news. Sometimes it's just about the people that you share those everyday moments with as you live through it. And this leads me to the second question that I want to ask you. It is a very character-based film. The setting is just in one house. And so can you tell us a little bit briefly about each character and how much they evolved between writing the script and when you started shooting the scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we didn't have I did not write a full 90-page script for this. I had a 30-page treatment in which some scenes were fully written out and some scenes were just like beats that had to happen for certain characters and certain interactions needed to happen. So much of this film is improv based. And because of that, every single character is based on the actual person who plays them. So me and the other actors would get together before we shot, and we would have these really long, in-depth conversations about the pieces of them that I wanted to be on screen and I wanted to come out while we were playing these games. And certain things, we would push a little bit. Like Marquise, the character who plays Yellow, he's not that grating in person, but we amped up that piece of his personality a little bit. And so every single person, it's all their real stories. There's moments in the film where the camera falls, almost falls down and picks itself up, and it's in this children's play setting, and the character tells a story directly to the camera. And all of those stories are actually real memories that they had or real experiences that these actors had. None of those actors are actually trained actors. They're all filmmakers or writers or editors. None of the people in this film are actually traditionally trained. The only person who was going to be a classically trained actor was to be the person who played my character. But she wound up, there was some conflicting, she was in a play, I believe. And so I wound up having to step in to fill that role for her. And that actually wound up changing the story because, like I said, every single character was based on the actual person who played that character. So the end, well, I don't want to give away the end, but the host's story that she tells is my real experiences as well.
Wonderful. I love that you're talking about the fact that most of the not most, all of the actors in the end were not trained actors. I think a lot of independent filmmakers, we have to deal with that because of shortness of funding or because of time crunch sometimes. And so I'd like to redirect the conversation a bit away from the content of the film to the actual process of making it. You were, like we said before, you wore so many hats. You were producer, director, actress. I saw an interview with you where you talked about costume design, finding funding, you name it, your hands were in it, basically. And so a lot of our audience members are probably filmmakers or students in filmmaking school. And so we always love to hear about ideas about how to overcome challenges, how to work through things on very little budgets and having to wear all these hats. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the decisions you had to make on set or before you got on set to run the shoot as smoothly as possible, but also without missing those golden moments that happen sometimes when improvisation is also part of the process?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, like I said earlier, we had a lot of conversations before we got to the day of shooting, because I knew that as soon as the camera was on and the camera was rolling, I was going to have to be acting, and there was going to have to be, I was going to be looking out for continuity as far as the production design, make sure that everybody was wearing coats or not wearing coats at the correct time, watching performances, making sure the camera was in the right place. I was also kind of the first AD, so making sure timing was also there while also worrying about performance, my performance. And so obviously that led to a bunch of funny mishaps, as where like there's parts of the footage that were great, but we couldn't use because I'm looking directly into the camera, making sure it's where it's supposed to be. And we also, one of the things that we did was we had, most of our takes were 20-minute takes where we had a setup where we had all of the characters in a circle, and the camera was just continuously going in a circle around the actors and the action that was taking place to make sure that we just didn't miss anything. We weren't cutting. Every now and then we would jump back in to be like, okay, Marquise, that was great. Or okay, Bridget, that was great. Let's do that one more time to make sure that we definitely got it. But for the most part, we were really flying by the seat of our pants. It was definitely not a traditional way to shoot a movie. There's certain things that we had that sort of fell into our laps for sure, and they were brilliant. And we kind of went with it because of something that an actor did or said or an accident that happened in the space around us. And so we really had a lot of freedom because there wasn't a script to just kind of roll with what felt good, as long as the really important beats of the story wasn't lost. So there's a bunch of conversation that's within the film that we wouldn't have been able to get had we not just been constantly rolling, constantly moving along.
Wonderful. Yeah, it takes so much improvisation, not from the actors' parts, but for independent filmmakers, we have to improvise a lot as well as we go. And oftentimes that's when the amazing things happen. So thank you for sharing a bit of that experience with us. Before I ask you the common thread question, I do have one more question about the film itself. What is next for Apocalypse A Go-Go, and what's next for you?
So we still have a couple more festivals that we're heading to, and we did secure distribution. So we are currently trying to find certain streaming who we're working with is looking for certain streaming platforms for us to go on, be that in Europe, we got worldwide distribution, or in the US. And so we're currently sort of navigating that field, which is very new for me. I am not a legally minded person at all, but that's really exciting. I mean, all I ever really wanted with this film was for people to see it. We made it with less than $1,000. And so all I ever wanted was that. We never thought we were going to make any money whatsoever. And then what's next for me is I have a feature film, a script that I wrote that is going to be produced out on the West Coast sometime next year called Local Haunts, which is a beach vampire hangout film that actually has the same kind of character-driven energy as well. It's not necessarily a direct horror movie. It's balancing a lot of that Black comedy and, talkiness that Apocalypse has, which I'm really excited about. And then there's also a couple more projects that I'm in the midst of writing currently as well, but I cannot announce those yet.
Fair enough. Where can we follow your work?
You can follow my work at savannahgislason.com. That's Gislson. That's a hard one. And then also doomsdaysoiree.com is the production company that is putting up Local Haunts as well. So
perfect. We'll make sure to look you up there. The last question, which is the question that we've asked to all filmmakers tonight, is what does supporting independent voices mean to you?
So I think all of the other speakers tonight really hit on the importance of independent voices in independent film. But so on a practical level, I think the most important thing to support is showing up and saying yes, because these movies don't happen with a lot of money. These movies do not happen with a lot of support, really. And so within the independent film community, we really have to sit down and read each other's scripts. We have to show up and run sound for somebody every now and then. We really have to show up and support each other. Like, Apocalypse would not have happened if I did not have 5 amazing actors, amazing crew members who are ready to just say yes and make something happen at any given point. So to me, that's what independent film needs going from this point, because I mean, there's big conglomerations, you know, we have the studio system, it's not set up for us to succeed. And the only way that we will succeed is by supporting each other's work and reading each other's work and collaboration. So that's what that means personally to me.
Wonderful. Well, in that spirit of support, if you haven't seen Apocalypse A Go-Go yet, I invite you to look it up by saying Portland Film Festival into your X1 or Flex Voice remote on Comcast, or head over to portlandfilm.org. Apocalypse A Go-Go is a really fun film about the awkwardness, but also the depth and beauty of human connection during moments of crisis, and I really recommend that you go have a look at that, and so many other films that will be on the film festival website until November 20th. Back to you, Choli. And thank you, Savannah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Evan, Savannah. This is such a perfect film for 2020. It's great pandemic viewing for sure. You know, this year's festival started October 12th and it's running to November 20th. That's right, you still have time. That's over a month of celebrating independent voices. As you can imagine, there is a huge amount of work that goes into the festival. And I'm excited to introduce you to someone that works tirelessly to make sure that the festival is a nurturing, safe place for filmmakers to be celebrated. That person is the executive director of the Portland Film Festival, Joshua Leake.
Hey, Jolie.
Hello.
You've done a fabulous job this evening. Woo. Thank you so much. It's been great watching you and listening to all the filmmakers. And I really feel that some of the comments and wisdom that they shared is something that we all can appreciate. First off, Jolie, as part of the Portland Film Festival's director on the board, we'd like to thank you for your logistical support, but also for hosting tonight. You did an amazing job. Behind you, and not necessarily in view, are probably 15 to 20 other staff members and volunteers that we'd like to thank, especially Michael Kurtz, our technical director and producer. Thank you, sir. And just everyone that's really been involved. Of course, I'd like to thank Amy Kiter of Comcast here in Portland, who has believed in the film festival since we first met 4 years ago. And also a new friend, Zane Vella of Comcast in Philadelphia, who shared never before used technology to make the festival possible this year in this virtual environment. We've never had a live streaming awards show, and this is really an amazing experience. We want to thank everyone. We'd also like to thank the wonderful Michael Kerner, who runs the largest and the best camera rental house on the West Coast. You can rent what I know as the best glass in the world. So if you're a filmmaker, you know what that is. It's the lenses on the camera. We call them glass. So thank you, Michael. We appreciate everything you do. And thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight and supporting independent voices. And just like Jolie said so many times today, just pull out your Comcast X1 or Flex voice remote and say Portland Film Festival and watch a movie. A great way to support independent voices.
Yeah. Again, thank you to all of our guests tonight. You were so brave in sharing your voices, and I promise they were heard. And thank you to all of our viewers for joining us. I encourage you to watch and share these films and support those independent voices. Good night, and thank you from the Portland Film Festival and Comcast.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Mom.
beginning again. Oh, don't ever give up, love. You never know when you'll be singing again. Yeah, don't ever give up, love. You never know when you'll be winning.